Far away in the endless black of space, something small and weak was moving through the darkness. It was not a ship or a piece of metal. It was a signal. A desperate cry for help sent from a world that was dying. The signal was old, broken, and filled with strange sounds that no human had ever heard before. But still it traveled on, skipping across stars, slipping through radiation clouds and bouncing off forgotten satellites that drifted alone for centuries. On that distant world, the people who sent the signal had no hope left. Their skies were filled with fire. Their oceans had turned to poison and their cities were falling apart. They had once been proud and strong, but now they were scared and weak. Their enemies had come without warning, machines that consumed everything, turning living worlds into dust. Their defenses had failed, their leaders were gone, and their children cried in fear. So, as a final act, a small group of survivors gathered in a bunker beneath the ruins and sent out a message to the stars. They didn't know who would hear it. They didn't even know if anyone still lived beyond their corner of space. But they sent it anyway, a coded SOS written in the language of mathematics and light. "Help us," it said again and again on every frequency they could reach. And when the last generator failed and the bunker went dark, they waited in silence, not knowing if anyone would ever answer. Light years away, on a small blue planet called Earth, humans were busy with their own problems. They had spread across their solar system, building stations on the Moon, Mars, and the icy moons of Jupiter. They were stronger than ever before, united under one flag, calling themselves the United Earth Coalition. But even with all their progress, humanity still looked at the stars with curiosity and hunger. They always wondered if someone else was out there watching. In the deserts of Australia, a massive array of radio telescopes scanned the sky. Every night they listened to the universe, hoping to catch a whisper from another civilization. Most of what they found was static, old signals from Earth satellites, radiation bursts from stars, and random noise. But one night something strange appeared. A young scientist named Aisha Khan was the first to notice it. She was alone in the control room, drinking cold coffee and checking data logs, when a sharp tone appeared on her monitor. At first she thought it was an error. The signal was faint, distorted, and buried under layers of cosmic noise. But when she zoomed in, she saw a repeating pattern. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. Someone, or something, was sending a message. Her hands trembled as she ran the data through the computer. The pattern was old, maybe decades or even centuries, but the rhythm was unmistakable. 3 short pulses, 3 long pulses, 3 short again. It was universal. It was an SOS. Isha's heart raced as she called her supervisor. Within minutes, the control room filled with people. Data scrolled across screens, and technicians worked frantically to clean up the signal. The more they decoded, the stranger it became. The message wasn't human. It was built from symbols no one had ever seen. But underneath the alien structure, the meaning was clear. A plea for help, sent across the endless void. Word spread quickly. The discovery reached the United Earth Science Directorate by morning, and within hours the signal was analyzed by artificial intelligence systems all over the planet. The conclusion was undeniable. The message had come from beyond human space, far outside known trade routes. It wasn't a trick or a reflection, it was real. For the first time in history, humanity wasn't alone, but the excitement didn't last long. As the scientists continued to study the signal, they found something else hidden inside it: coordinates. The origin of the distress call was a planet orbiting a dying star near the edge of the Perseus Arm. That was nearly 20,000 light-years away, far beyond any human colony. The planet's surface readings showed radiation, burning heat, and massive destruction. It was clear that whoever had sent the signal wasn't just asking for help. They were fighting for their lives. Meetings began all over Earth and its colonies. Military officials, scientists, politicians, all of them wanted to know what to do. Should humanity respond? Should they risk traveling across unknown space for a species they had never met? Some feared it was a trap. Others said it was a test. But deep down, everyone knew the truth. Humanity had always been the species that ran toward danger, not away from it. Across the networks, people argued and speculated. News channels called it the voice from the void. Religious leaders called it the cry of creation. Conspiracy theorists claimed it was bait, a lure to bring humans into an alien war. But for most people, the message awakened something old inside them. a mix of fear, curiosity, and hope. Meanwhile, Aisha watched from her console as the signal slowly faded. Each time she listened, she imagined what it must have been like for the ones who sent it. The fear, the desperation, the courage to send a message into the dark with no promise of an answer. It haunted her. She couldn't sleep, and she couldn't stop thinking about it. Soon, the United Earth Fleet got involved. These were the same men and women known across nearby systems as Deathworlders, a name given by alien species that had once tried to measure human strength and failed. To the other civilizations of the galaxy, Earth was the nightmare world, the one where everything tried to kill you. Diseases, predators, weather, and even other humans. And yet humans had survived it all. They had adapted, evolved, and thrived. That toughness had become legend. Now that same reputation was stirring again. Reports of the alien distress call spread through the fleet's command centers. Officers whispered that someone out there had called the monsters from Earth to their rescue. But for the Deathworlders themselves, there was no pride in the name, only purpose. They knew what it meant to fight against impossible odds. They knew what it meant to need help and have none come. As the final analysis of the signal came in, humanity prepared to decide. The message was genuine. The senders were real. Their world was dying, and no one else had answered. In the quiet halls of the Fleet Command, a meeting was called. Generals, scientists, and world leaders sat around a glowing table as the decoded signal played in the background. A low rhythmic hum filled the air, followed by a voice unlike anything human, trembling and weak but still clear enough to understand one word. Help. The room went silent. No one spoke for a long time. Then the commander of the fleet, Admiral Reyes, stood up. He looked at the stars through the observation window and said the words that would change everything. If they had the courage to ask for help, we will have the courage to answer. The decision spread across the planet like wildfire. The engineers began preparing ships. The pilots checked their systems. The soldiers polished their armor. From every corner of Earth and its colonies, humanity united with one goal: to follow the signal and find the ones who sent it. As Aisha watched the first warships rise from the spaceport, she felt a strange mix of fear and pride. She had always dreamed of finding life beyond Earth, but she never imagined it would lead to this. The SOS had reached them, and now the Deathworlders were coming. And somewhere in the cold void between stars, the faint echo of that alien message still whispered through the dark, unaware that the most dangerous species in the galaxy had heard their call and was on its way. The discovery of the alien SOS shook the whole planet. Overnight, humanity went from being alone in the universe to knowing that someone out there was calling for help. The message spread through the networks like fire. Every news channel, every social feed, every radio talked about the same thing. People watched the footage of the signal waveform on screens and felt something they couldn't describe. Fear mixed with wonder. Some cried, some prayed. Others just stared at the stars in silence, trying to imagine what kind of beings had sent that desperate call. Inside the halls of power, things were not calm. The United Earth government called an emergency meeting in Geneva. Representatives from every colony, Mars, Titan, Europa, and even the asteroid stations, joined through holographic links. The room was filled with tension, military uniforms mixed with lab coats and diplomatic suits. Everyone wanted answers. Dr. Aisha Khan, the scientist who had first discovered the signal, stood in front of them. Her voice trembled slightly as she explained what her team had found. The signal wasn't random, it wasn't a natural event, and it wasn't from any known human transmission. It carried coordinates and data about the sender's location, and the planet it came from seemed to be dying. Radiation storms fire across its surface and massive damage, all signs of war or disaster. Whoever sent this, Aisha said softly, they're not just asking for contact. They're begging for rescue. The room went silent. Then a general broke the quiet. It could be a trap, he said. We have no idea who they are or what they want. What if they're leading us into an ambush? Another voice answered. And what if it's real? What if there's a whole civilization dying out there while we sit here doing nothing? Arguments broke out. Some wanted to send probes first. Some said humanity shouldn't get involved in alien conflicts. But others believed ignoring the call would go against everything humanity stood for. After all, humans were survivors. They had faced extinction many times and always found a way through. Maybe that was why they felt a strange connection to the unknown voices crying for help. Meanwhile, across the world, the public was restless. Protests and gatherings filled the streets. Some demanded that the government respond immediately and send aid. Others warned that the aliens could be dangerous. A popular phrase appeared everywhere. If we were dying, wouldn't we hope someone came for us? In the middle of the chaos, military command centers were already working quietly. The United Earth Fleet, the most powerful force ever built by humankind, was placed on alert. Hundreds of ships orbited the planet and its colonies, ready for deep space deployment. The fleet was known across the stars as something terrifying, the Deathworlder Armada. The name had not been chosen by humans. Long ago, when humanity had first met other intelligent species, those aliens had studied Earth and called it a death world. They couldn't understand how life had survived there. Diseases, predators, harsh climates, endless wars. They thought no sane being could come from such a violent planet. And yet humans had. They had evolved through constant struggle. To other species, humans seemed impossibly tough, almost unnatural. So the name stuck. Deathworlders. And now those same Deathworlders were about to decide the fate of a distant species crying for help. Admiral Reyes, the commander of the United Earth Fleet, sat in a dark room overlooking the Pacific. The window showed the reflection of Earth's orbit where ships glowed like silver lines across the sky. He had served in wars, seen worlds burn, and carried the weight of countless decisions, but this one felt different. If they went, there would be no guarantee of return. The alien world was far beyond safe space. The journey could take months, maybe years, depending on jump routes. Still, something inside him wouldn't allow hesitation. He remembered the early days of space exploration, when humanity looked up at the stars with fear and curiosity. They had always believed they were alone. But the SOS had changed everything. His communications officer entered quietly. "Sir," she said, "the council is waiting for your decision." Reyes stood, straightened his uniform, and walked to the briefing hall. There, a dozen high-ranking officials were gathered. The president of the United Earth Coalition appeared through a hologram. Her voice was calm but heavy. "Admiral," she said, "you've seen the data. What's your assessment?" Reyes placed his hands behind his back. "It's real," he said. "They're in trouble. The signal shows destruction on a global scale. Whoever they are, they don't have long." "And if it's a trap?" another official asked. Reyes looked at him steadily. "Then we'll handle it. We've survived worse." The room fell silent again. Then the president spoke the words everyone was waiting for. "Prepare the fleet." Across the solar system, orders were transmitted. Dockyards lit up as massive engines came alive. Crews ran through corridors loading supplies, fuel, and weapons. Engineers worked around the clock to ready the warp drives. Medics stocked cryobeds and emergency kits. Scientists packed translation devices and first contact gear. The news spread quickly. People watched from rooftops and spaceports as enormous warships rose through the atmosphere, their engines burning blue fire. Some ships were the size of cities, carriers carrying hundreds of smaller crafts. Others were sleek and fast, built for exploration and rescue. Together, they formed the largest human fleet ever assembled for a single mission. But despite the size and power, their purpose wasn't conquest. Every officer knew this wasn't a war mission, it was a response. Humanity was going not to destroy, but to save. Still, they couldn't ignore the risk. No one knew what waited for them on that distant world. In a quiet corner of the control room, Aisha watched the preparations through a live feed. She had been invited to join the mission as a civilian scientist. Part of her wanted to say no, to stay on Earth and continue her research safely. But another part of her, the part that had looked at the stars since childhood, couldn't resist. She had heard the alien plea before anyone else. It had spoken to her soul. She wanted to see the place where it came from. She signed the papers. She would board the flagship Horizon's Wrath, traveling alongside the fleet. Before launch, there was one final meeting in orbit aboard the command vessel. Admiral Reyes stood before the assembled officers, his voice echoing through the deck. "We are answering a call from the stars," he said. "We don't know what we'll find out there. We don't know if we'll come back. But we do know this. When someone cries for help, humanity answers. That's who we are," the officers saluted. In that moment, fear and pride filled the air. They weren't just soldiers anymore. They were the face of humanity. Back on Earth, billions watched the live broadcast as the fleet prepared for its jump into hyperspace. Families stood together holding hands. Children waved flags. Some whispered prayers. The countdown began, echoing across every screen. 10, 9, 8. Aisha felt her heartbeat quicken. She looked out the viewport as the stars shimmered. The thought of the aliens waiting on their ruined planet filled her mind. Were they still alive? Did they believe anyone would come? 3, 2, 1. The engines roared. Space twisted into a blur of light, and the Deathworlder fleet vanished into hyperspace. Silence filled the control rooms on Earth. The mission had begun. For days afterward, people talked about nothing else. Songs were written. Poems spread online. Humanity had always dreamed of reaching out to others, and now they had finally done it. The phrase "the SOS fleet" became a symbol of hope. But in the shadows of power, not everyone was celebrating. Intelligence agencies warned that contact with an unknown species could lead to conflict. Some believed humanity might be walking into an interstellar war they didn't understand. Yet even those voices couldn't stop what had already started. The decision had been made. Humanity was on its way to answer the call. Back aboard the Horizon's Wrath, Aisha sat by a window watching the stars stretch like rivers of light. The hum of the ship's engines filled the air. Around her, soldiers joked quietly. Scientists whispered calculations and pilots checked their consoles. Everyone pretended to be calm, but she could feel the tension beneath the surface. They were heading into the unknown. She took a deep breath and whispered to herself, "Whoever you are, I hope we're not too late." In that endless sea of darkness, far beyond what any human had ever seen, the faint coordinates from the alien signal glowed on the navigation screen. A single point of light in an infinite night. That was their destination, a dying world that had dared to send an SOS into the void. And now, for the first time in history, the Deathworlders were coming, not as conquerors, but as saviors. The Deathworlder fleet moved through the darkness of space like a storm made of metal and fire. Dozens of ships, each the size of cities, glided silently through the endless black, their engines burning with blue light. Inside those ships were thousands of humans, soldiers, engineers, medics, and scientists, each one aware that they were flying toward something completely unknown. They had left behind their homes, their families, and the safety of their solar system to answer a cry for help from across the galaxy. For most of them, the journey felt unreal. Outside the thick metal walls of their ships, there was nothing. No air, no sound, only the cold vacuum of space. The fleet traveled through hyperspace tunnels, where stars stretched into long ribbons of light. The walls of reality seemed to bend and twist, and time felt strange. Minutes could feel like hours, and days could pass in silence. But inside, life continued. Aisha Khan spent most of her time in the science wing of the flagship Horizon's Wrath. Her job was to monitor the alien signal and track their destination. Every time she listened to that faint sound, the soft hum mixed with static, she felt the same chill she had felt the first night she heard it on Earth. Even though it was weak and broken, it still carried emotion, fear, pain, hope. She couldn't explain it. But every time the signal played, she felt as if someone out there was waiting, holding on to life just a little longer in the belief that help was coming. She wasn't alone in her thoughts. Around the ship, soldiers trained in the cargo bays, running drills and simulations. They practiced landing on unstable planets, fighting in toxic atmospheres, and rescuing civilians. But beneath all that discipline, there was unease. No one knew what to expect when they arrived. What if the aliens were already gone? What if the signal had been sent years ago and they were too late? One night, Aisha found herself in the observation deck, staring at the hyperspace currents. Admiral Reyes joined her quietly. He was a tall man with sharp eyes and a calm voice. He had seen more battles than most of his crew combined. For a while, they just stood there watching the streams of light. Then Aisha asked, "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" Reyes didn't answer immediately. "The right thing," he said slowly, "is never clear until it's done. But I know this. We heard someone call for help. And we have the power to answer. That's enough for me." Aisha smiled faintly. "Even if they're afraid of us?" He turned to her. "They probably should be. But they'll learn what kind of monsters we really are, the kind that don't ignore suffering." His words stayed with her long after he left. Days turned into weeks. The fleet jumped from one relay to another, crossing sectors of dead space. They passed the remains of old battlefields, wrecked ships floating silently, ancient ruins of forgotten wars. Humanity had never traveled this far before. Each new star they passed was a reminder of how small and fragile they really were. Yet they kept going. The crew shared stories to keep their spirits up. Some told tales of the first colonists who had settled on Mars. Others spoke of the oceans of Europa, where glowing fish swam beneath frozen surfaces. And sometimes they joked about what the aliens might look like. Maybe they've got 6 arms, one soldier laughed. Or maybe they're just floating brains in jars. But deep down, everyone wondered the same thing. Would they even be able to communicate with them? The signal had been partially decoded, but it was still mostly a mystery. The only clear thing was the pattern of distress. The aliens had been in danger, and that danger might still be there. On the 6th week of travel, the fleet encountered a strange anomaly, a region of space filled with debris. Old satellites, destroyed stations, and broken ships floated like ghosts. The scanners picked up weak energy signatures, but no life signs. As they passed through, the crews grew quiet. The sight of so many shattered ships was unsettling. "This is what happens when help never comes," one engineer whispered. Later, in the command room, Aisha and the Admiral studied the map. The signal from the alien planet was getting stronger. They were close. But there was something odd about the readings. The surrounding region showed faint signs of movement, like ships patrolling the outer system. Reyes frowned. "Looks like we're not the only ones out here." "Pirates?" Aisha asked. "Could be," he replied. "Or whatever destroyed their world might still be watching." He ordered the fleet to enter stealth formation. The ships dimmed their lights and cut down power emissions. From that moment, the mood changed. Laughter disappeared. Conversations became short and tense. The sense of adventure was replaced by caution. They were entering unknown space. When the first view of the alien system appeared on the main screen, everyone on the bridge went silent. The planet was a sphere of gray and red, its surface burning with storms. Once it might have been beautiful, oceans, mountains, cities, but now it looked broken. Fragments of satellites orbited it like dust. Massive scars crossed its surface, visible even from orbit. Isha felt her stomach twist. "Oh my God," she whispered. "It's worse than we thought." Scanners confirmed the atmosphere was poisoned. Radiation levels were high, and power sources flickered across the surface like dying embers, but there were still faint life signs. Weak, scattered, and barely holding on. "They're alive," Reyes said quietly. "Some of them, at least." He turned to his officers. "Prepare landing teams. We're going in." While preparations began, Aisha studied the final transmission embedded in the SOS signal. It was short and almost unreadable, but she could make out a few translated words. Attack. Falling. Children. Mercy. Her eyes filled with tears. Whoever had sent it must have known they were out of time. They had sent that message knowing they might never see the answer. The landing ships detached from the fleet and descended toward the planet. Through the thick clouds, flashes of lightning revealed the ruined landscape below. Collapsed towers, craters, and rivers of molten rock. The air was filled with dust and static. Inside one of the dropships, soldiers sat in silence, their helmets sealed, weapons ready. Aisha sat among them, gripping her data tablet. She wasn't a fighter, but she refused to stay behind. She wanted to see them, the ones who had called for help. The descent was rough. Turbulence shook the craft violently. At one point, an explosion in the sky made everyone jump. "What was that?" Someone shouted. "Debris," the pilot answered. Or, "Something shooting at us." The soldiers prepared for battle. The Deathworlders were known for their toughness, but even they could feel the tension in their bones. They had come to save lives, but now it looked like they might have to fight for their own. As they broke through the clouds, they saw the surface clearly for the first time. The city below them was in ruins, but there were signs of movement. Small figures running through the wreckage, lights flickering from underground shelters. The scanners confirmed it. "Survivors. Contact with local life forms," the pilot reported. Rhea's voice came through the comms. "Hold your fire. We didn't come to kill anyone. Secure the landing zone and establish contact." The ship touched down with a heavy thud. Dust and ash filled the air. The door opened, and the soldiers stepped out, their armor reflecting the red glow of the burning horizon. Aisha followed, coughing as her boots sank into the soft, cracked ground. The air smelled of smoke and metal. And then, through the haze, she saw them. The aliens were smaller than humans, thin and pale, with large, dark eyes that shimmered in the dim light. They looked terrified. Some held metal rods like makeshift weapons. Others carried injured companions. When they saw the humans, towering figures in armored suits, they froze in shock. Aisha raised her hand slowly, showing she meant no harm. She took a step forward, her voice calm. "We're here to help," she said through the translator. The alien nearest to her tilted its head. The translator clicked, repeating her words in their language. The creature blinked, then whispered something weakly. The translator spoke again. "You came?" Aisha nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "Yes, we came." Behind her, the soldiers began unloading medical supplies. Engineers set up field generators to stabilize the air. For the first time in centuries, the dying world felt hope. The Deathworlders, those feared across the stars, had arrived not with guns blazing, but with open hands. High above, the rest of the fleet remained in orbit, scanning for danger. Unknown ships lingered on the edge of the system, watching. The humans knew this wasn't over. But for now, the mission was clear: rescue the survivors, rebuild what could be saved, and protect those who had called for help. As night fell on that broken world, Aisha stood beneath the alien sky, looking up at the faint glimmer of Earth's fleet. She felt something stir deep inside her, a sense that this was only the beginning. Humanity had crossed the stars to answer an SOS, but what waited ahead might change the fate of every species in the galaxy. The first hours on the alien planet were chaos. The air was thick with smoke and dust. The sky burned red and strange winds howled through the ruins of what once must have been a great civilization. The Deathworlder soldiers moved quickly, forming a secure perimeter around the landing zone. Their armor gleamed faintly in the dim light, their helmets reflecting broken towers and fire. Every sound made them tense: the groaning of metal, the distant crackle of explosions, the faint, desperate cries that echoed across the wasteland. Aisha Khan stood near the medical tents, watching the first group of alien survivors being carried in. They were fragile, thin, and covered in ash. Their skin looked translucent, almost like glass. Some were injured, others too weak to stand. But when they saw the humans working, lifting rubble, handing out water, giving first aid, they stared in disbelief. They had expected monsters, not rescuers. One alien, who seemed older than the rest, whispered through cracked lips. The translator device picked up the words and repeated them softly in English. Deathworlders came. "But why do they help?" Aisha knelt beside him. "Because you asked," she said simply. The alien blinked, confused. He looked at the human medics working with care, at the soldiers who guarded them without aggression, and his eyes filled with tears. He reached out a trembling hand, and Aisha took it gently. For the first time in what felt like centuries, he smiled. Meanwhile, Admiral Reyes and his command team set up a temporary base inside the remains of an alien structure. The walls were covered in strange markings, the symbols of a lost culture. As the humans explored, they realized that this had once been a beautiful city. Tall towers, flowing energy lines, floating transport systems. But now everything was broken, melted, and burned. It wasn't time or nature that had destroyed it. It was war. Reyes looked at the destruction around him and clenched his fists. "They didn't just fall," he said grimly. "They were hunted." Recon drones flew over the city, sending back footage of massive craters and machine wreckage. The aliens had fought some kind of mechanical army, machines built for one purpose only: destruction. The Deathworlder engineers examined the remains and found that the attackers had stripped everything of resources, leaving the planet to die. When the fleet's communication link stabilized, Reyes sent a report back to the United Earth Command. Planet confirmed under attack by unknown mechanical force. Limited survivors located. Deathworlder fleet proceeding with rescue and defense operations. Back on Earth, the news spread like wildfire. Billions watched live updates from orbit. The images were shocking. Humans walking among aliens, helping them rebuild, standing guard against raiders. People called it the day humanity became guardians. But the mission on the surface was far from safe. As the humans began setting up energy shields and power stations to help the survivors, sensors picked up movement at the edge of the city. The machines that had destroyed this world were not gone. They were watching. The first attack came at dusk. A metallic roar echoed through the ruins as dozens of drones swooped in from the clouds, firing beams of plasma. The Deathworlders reacted instantly. The soldiers moved like lightning, taking cover and returning fire with precise bursts. Explosions lit the sky and burning debris rained down. Aisha ducked behind a fallen column as bullets and plasma bolts hissed through the air. Her heart pounded, but when she peeked over the rubble, she saw something that made her breath catch. The aliens, those who could still stand, were fighting too. They grabbed what little weapons they had and joined the humans. Rhea's voice boomed through the comms. "Hold the line. Protect the civilians." The Deathworlders were known for their toughness, and tonight they proved why. Despite the chaos, their coordination was flawless. Squad after squad pushed forward, driving the machines back into the desert. Their armor glowed with heat, their faces streaked with sweat, but they didn't stop. They had come to help, and no one, not even an army of machines, was going to stop them. When the last drone exploded in a flash of light, silence returned. Smoke rose into the air. The survivors watched as the humans stood among the wreckage, weapons still smoking, eyes scanning for more threats. To the aliens, it looked impossible. How could creatures from such a violent world also be capable of such courage and mercy? A young alien child ran up to one of the human soldiers and touched his armor. The translator hummed softly. "You are the ones from the death world?" The soldier knelt smiling behind his helmet. "That's what they call us," he said. "But we're just people trying to help." The child tilted his head, then said something that made everyone around pause. "Then death itself must be afraid of you." Word spread quickly among the alien survivors. The Deathworlders were no longer seen as destroyers. They were saviors. Every time a human lifted debris, every time a medic saved a life, the aliens whispered their gratitude. They began to call them the Sky Warriors of Mercy. Over the next few days, the humans and aliens worked side by side. Engineers from the fleet repaired power grids using hybrid technology, creating light where there had been only darkness. Medics taught the aliens how to treat wounds using portable nanotech. Soldiers built walls and turrets to keep out future attacks. Slowly, the city began to breathe again. But as they rebuilt, the truth of what had happened here became clearer. Aisha and the science team discovered massive underground bunkers filled with ancient data archives. After decoding them, they learned that the aliens, called the Vareen, had once been a peaceful and artistic race. They had no real military, no concept of large-scale war. When the machine swarm arrived from deep space, they had no way to defend themselves. The SOS had been their final hope. Aisha sat in front of one of the recovered terminals, reading the last recorded message from the Vareen leader. "To whoever hears this, we are sorry. We built beauty, not weapons. We gave life, not death. But now only death answers. If any being hears this message, we beg you, remember us not as victims, but as those who dared to hope." Tears rolled down her cheeks. She understood now why the signal had touched humanity so deeply. The Vareen weren't warriors, they were dreamers. And that dream had almost been erased. Almost one night. As the stars shimmered faintly through the smog, Aisha walked through the ruins with Admiral Reyes. The alien city glowed with soft blue lights from the human generators. "They're rebuilding," she said quietly. Reyes nodded. "We're giving them time. That's all they need." But even as he spoke, sensors detected something massive moving in orbit. The machine fleet had returned. Giant ships emerged from the shadows, their hulls black as the void, their weapons glowing red. The Deathworlders were about to face a battle unlike any they had fought before. Reyes didn't hesitate. He ordered all human forces to return to defensive positions. The fleet above the planet aligned its weapons. Across the command channels, his voice was steady. "This is it, people. We're not just fighting for them. We're fighting for the promise we made to answer the call." The machines attacked first. Blinding beams of energy rained from the sky, tearing through the atmosphere. The Deathworlder warships responded with full firepower, unleashing plasma cannons and railguns that lit up the heavens. The night became a storm of destruction. On the ground, Aisha watched as streaks of light crossed the sky, ships burning, machines falling. The air shook with thunder. Yet even as chaos surrounded them, the human soldiers didn't break. They fought shoulder to shoulder with the Vareen, protecting every survivor they could. Hours passed like seconds. The battle raged across space and land. At one point, a massive explosion lit the horizon as the lead Deathworlder ship, Horizon's Wrath, rammed one of the enemy dreadnoughts. Rhea's voice came through the comms, calm even in the end. "Tell Earth," we answered. Then the transmission cut off. When the dust finally settled, the machines were gone. Some had been destroyed, others retreated into the void. The cost was heavy. Many human ships had fallen and thousands of soldiers were gone. But the planet was safe. The Varine were alive. As dawn broke over the ruined city, the remaining Deathworlders stood together, watching the light spread across the horizon. Aisha looked up at the rising sun through the smoky air. It was weak but beautiful. The surviving aliens gathered around them, their leader stepping forward. His voice trembled as he spoke through the translator. "We called the Deathworlders in fear," he said. "We thought you were demons. But you came as angels. We will never forget," Isha smiled sadly. "We're no angels," she said. "We're just humans." The alien bowed deeply. "Then the universe is lucky to have humans." That day, the Deathworlders finished their mission. They had answered the SOS not with destruction, but with compassion and courage. The legend of their arrival spread far beyond that world. Across the galaxy, civilizations whispered the same words. When the stars cry for help, Deathworlders answer. Months had passed since the great battle that saved the Varine homeworld. The smoke had cleared, the fires had died, and the sky, once filled with flames and debris, had turned blue again. The humans who survived the fight stayed behind to help rebuild, their ships orbiting above like silent guardians. The Deathworlder fleet had done what no one believed possible. They had answered an alien SOS, fought an impossible enemy, and survived. But for the humans who had seen the war up close, the scars were deep, both on the ground and in their hearts. Aisha Khan walked through the rebuilt streets of the Varine capital, now half metal and half crystal. Human engineers had helped design the new structures, blending human strength with Varine elegance. Towering buildings made of glass-like stone shimmered in the light, and glowing plants lined the walkways. Children played where rubble once lay. The air smelled of life again. Every sound, the laughter, the chatter, even the hum of the machines, felt like a song of survival. But Aisha couldn't forget the faces of those who hadn't made it back. Admiral Reyes was gone, lost in the explosion that had destroyed the enemy dreadnought. His final words, "Tell Earth," we answered, still echoed in her mind. To the people of Earth, he had become a hero. To Aisha, he was more than that. He was the reason humanity had become something greater. Everywhere she went, the Varine showed their gratitude. They wore small badges crafted in the shape of the Deathworlder fleet insignia, a symbol of courage and hope. The once fearful aliens now spoke openly about their human allies. In every corner of the rebuilt city, murals showed scenes of the humans landing, fighting, and helping. One of them even showed Aisha, kneeling beside a wounded alien child offering water. She blushed the first time she saw it, but she couldn't deny the warmth it brought to her heart. The Varine leader, Elder Saren, had become a close friend. His thin, translucent hands trembled slightly as he worked alongside human engineers. He often said, "When we sent that signal, we never expected an answer. We thought it would vanish into the void, but you came. You came from the death world." Aisha would always reply with a soft smile, "We came because no one deserves to die alone." Back on Earth, the news of the Deathworlder fleet's victory had transformed humanity's image in the galaxy. What once was fear, stories of humans as dangerous, unpredictable beings, had turned into respect. Across hundreds of systems, alien species began to reach out asking for friendship, trade, and alliances. The United Earth Command received dozens of messages from distant worlds. The words were always similar. If the Deathworlders can care, perhaps we were wrong to fear them. But not everyone saw peace as the end. Among the humans, there was debate. Some wanted to retreat home, to rebuild their own defenses after losing so many ships. Others believed humanity had a new role, to be protectors of the weak, guardians of those who could not defend themselves. Isha stood in front of a large memorial one evening. It was made of black stone and silver metal with thousands of names engraved into its surface, the humans and Varine who had died side by side. The wind carried the sound of soft alien music through the streets. She closed her eyes and whispered, "You didn't die for nothing." Suddenly, a voice spoke behind her. No, they didn't. She turned and saw Commander Hale, Rhea's second-in-command. His uniform was worn and there were scars on his face, but his eyes were calm. "We're building something new, Aisha," he said. "A joint defense force. Humans and Varine together. We're calling it the Guardian Fleet." Aisha looked at him, surprised. "You're serious?" "Completely. The galaxy's big and there are still threats out there. The machines weren't acting alone. We've detected signals, others like them, coming from the dark regions beyond mapped space. We can't just wait for another SOS. Next time we'll be ready." For a long moment, Aisha said nothing. Then she nodded. "Then count me in." The following months were filled with preparation. Human and Varine engineers worked side by side, building new ships that combined their best technologies. The sleek designs of the Varine merged with the rugged strength of human engineering. The result was beautiful. Warships that looked alive, glowing softly with energy. The new fleet was not built for conquest but for defense. Its mission was simple: answer any call for help, anywhere, anytime. When the first ship of the Guardian Fleet launched, crowds gathered on both Earth and Varine Prime to watch. The ship's name was chosen carefully, Reyes's Promise. As it rose into orbit, the people cheered, and for the first time in a long while, there was hope that the galaxy could truly change. Aisha stood on the deck, looking out the viewport as the stars stretched into long lines of light. She remembered the moment she had first heard the SOS, the desperate voice begging for mercy. That voice had changed everything. It had turned humanity from feared survivors into saviors, and now it was leading them to a new destiny. But even in peace, the shadows lingered. Far beyond the edges of known space, remnants of the machine swarm stirred. Fragments of their network, still active, sent out cold signals. Deep in the void, an intelligence watched and calculated. Humanity had proven stronger than expected. They would need to adapt. On Varine Prime, meanwhile, life continued to flourish. The cities glowed brighter every night. The humans who stayed were treated as family. Children from both species played together, learning each other's languages. Some even began to dream of mixed colonies, where humans and aliens could live side by side. One evening, as the twin moons rose above the horizon, Aisha sat by the river that flowed through the rebuilt capital. The water reflected the soft lights of the city. Elder Saren joined her, walking slowly with the help of a carved staff. He said quietly, "Do you know what your people have done, Aisha? You have changed what it means to be from a death world. Once that name meant fear. Now it means hope." She smiled faintly. "Maybe hope and fear aren't so different. They both make you strong if you don't let them control you." The elder nodded. "Yes, and that is what makes your kind special. You fight not just because you can, but because you must." Aisha looked up at the stars. Somewhere up there, Earth was shining. Somewhere, more worlds were waiting. "We'll keep answering," she said softly, "no matter how far the signal comes from." As the night grew quiet, a faint beeping sound came from her communicator. It was a new message, an emergency transmission. The signal was weak, filled with static, but the meaning was clear. Another SOS. Aisha looked at the device, then at the elder. He didn't need to ask. He already knew. She stood up, determination glowing in her eyes. "Looks like someone else needs help," Saren smiled. "Then go, Deathworlder. The stars still need you." Within hours, the Guardian Fleet prepared to depart. Engines roared and the night sky blazed with light. As the fleet rose, the Varine watched from the ground, hands raised in silent farewell. For them, the humans had become more than allies. They had become legends. In orbit, Aisha stood on the bridge of Reyes's Promise, gazing at the vast darkness ahead. The crew around her, both human and Varine, moved with purpose. "Set course for the signal," she ordered. "Coordinates locked," the pilot replied. The ship's engines ignited, and in a burst of light they jumped to hyperspace. As the stars blurred into streaks, Aisha whispered to herself, "For Reyes, for all of us." And somewhere, across the endless night, another voice, lost, afraid, and desperate, was about to learn the same truth that the Varine had discovered. When hope fades and darkness rises, there is one force in the galaxy that always answers: the Deathworlders. The ones who came when everyone else turned away. The ones who carried mercy in one hand and fire in the other. And so the legend continued. Wherever an SOS echoed through the void, humanity would come, not as conquerors but as guardians. Because when the universe cried for help, the Deathworlders didn't just listen, they answered.